wants to live in the Rockies.
Welcome to Beach Radio's Townsqare Tonight. Your chance to speak with Jersey Shore newsmakers about the issues that affect you. Call 732-505-1160. Now, from Beach Radio News, Townsqare Tonight on Beach Radio 1160, 1310 at mybeachradio.com.
The Jersey Shore is far different than it was 5 years ago today. Back then, the last of Superstorm Sandy departed and left an unprecedented track of destruction in its wake. Are we back to normal? Are you? What constitutes normal in the face of storms growing more fierce and protective measures struggling the way many shore families still are? We'd like to hear from you this hour as we chart progress and pinpoint obstacles still in the way. Here to point out those points tonight, we welcome in from the New Jersey Resource Project, Amanda DeVecca-Rainier, Joe Mangino, and Doug and Heather Quinn of the New Jersey Organizing Project, all of whom have spent a great deal of time on the ground talking to people just like you who have been through it and who are still recovering. Welcome in, everybody. And we look forward to hearing from you at home at 732-505-1160. I just want to preface it with how different it is from the perspective of someone who was fielding phone calls 5 years ago at that point. And Bob Levy and I just stayed on all night, and the calls were so frighteningly raw, and the fear was so palpable in people. I have never really experienced it outside of 9/11 up until that point, anything even resembling that. I don't hear that anymore. I hear more confidence in people, and I hear a slow rebound going on in their tone, in their attitudes. Of course, all of that next day opening doors for people and you first and all that business, it's kind of trailed away a little bit. But I still know people who are having trouble, and I know you do too. So let me just start with a basic question. You've been out talking to people. What have you seen in terms of the biggest obstacles they still face? And from that, let's springboard into the report that went out called The Long
Road Home.
Long Road Home. Very extensive, and it's online too. So based on what you've seen in the last couple of days, I know you've been circumventing the state. What's your assessment?
The struggle is real for these people, and as we come up on an anniversary, all those emotions are flooding back. So the people that are home, they're happy to be there, but at the same time, they almost feel some guilt and regret because there are still a couple thousand people that aren't home yet. And yesterday, when we did this tour of the shore, we highlighted 3 families that 5 years later are not home, and they all had different stories. It was insurance companies, it was contractor fraud, it was the issues with the REM program. So not everybody has the same story, but there are some common denominators. And REM, contractor fraud, and the insurance companies are the 3 big ones that we continue to encounter.
Are these points part and parcel of the Long Road Home?
They are, absolutely. The Long Road Home kind of chronicles what went wrong over the last 5 years, and it makes some recommendations for what we could do better. And that's a really important question. What can we do better? Not just for us in New Jersey. I mean, and we found in the Long Road Home that 22% of our survey respondents still weren't home. And if you crunch the state's numbers in the REM program, you have to do it for them. They won't put it out quite like this. It's around 26 or 27% of the families in the REM program that still aren't home. So it's about 1 in 5 families that are still not back or finished after Sandy's 5 years later, and that's really significant. It's significant for us in New Jersey, but it's significant for the whole country. We just watched a really intense storm season, and we are really concerned that families in Florida, Louisiana, Puerto Rico are going to go through the same obstacles we have unless there's some serious changes to the policies and programs that are in place.
We have a call on line 1 at 732-505-1160. Let us welcome in our caller and see what's on his or her mind. Welcome, you're on Townsqare tonight, and what's your first name and where are you from?
Hi, it's Carlos Rodriguez from Fulfill.
Carlos, Mr. Rodriguez, thank you for calling. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Tom, and you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I asked Carlos Rodriguez to call because he has had a specific function within all of this, and he came into what was then the food bank of Monmouth and Ocean counties, and in the transition process to Fulfill, bridged a great deal of hunger needs during the Superstorm. I just was looking for your perspective, Mr. Rodriguez, in terms of what you saw immediately after, and what you see now. And can you draw any correlation between the need that you're seeing now and the need that emerged after the storm?
Well, there's definitely a correlation. I think it dovetails nicely with the report that your guests are referencing. You know, the recovery we always knew would be at least 10 years old. And, you know, here we are at the midway point. What we saw early on was an immediate need for just basic essentials. That spiked to raise the population in our pantries at its peak by about 15%. We were already serving about 131,000 people. The storm added about 15% more at its peak. And even today, we're still seeing families that are struggling to make ends meet. They may be home, they may find a new home, but they're still dealing with the economic impact of losing all their valuables and losing their home, or having to pay multiple housing costs as they struggle to get back somewhere. So it's far from over. It's a complicated scenario for so many families. The numbers are absolutely astounding. And at the end of the day, while they're struggling to get back home and navigate a very complex system that no one is ever ready for, they're also struggling to be a worker, be a parent, and be able to provide very basic needs to their families.
Mr. Rodriguez, when you started your program of Navigators, it was a very small-scale thing, and it had to do with taxes, and it seemed very innovative at the time. Now it seems like an absolute necessity, because not only are they doing that, but they have branched out into other areas as well. Are you considering whether they should branch out further into the psychological end of this whole thing and all of that damage that goes on?
Well, we definitely, one of the opportunities that we have with seeing such a large percentage of the population, 10% in just Monmouth and Ocean counties, is that you really have an opportunity to ask why. Why are families not able to put food on the table and really be able to deal with referring and connecting families with resources? And in fact, during Sandy, there were many referrals to mental health agencies just to help families with basic coping mechanisms. And it's something that was really heightened and focused on in the years immediately after Sandy. But I think, as we've heard already, there is a lot of emotion, there is a lot of psychological weight that families carry much longer than even when they return back home. So you're right. I mean, our approach to dealing with the problem of hunger is absolutely provide food for that immediate need. But we have an opportunity to ask, well, why are you here, and what else can we do? One of the things that we learned immediately after Sandy is that there was not a lot of opportunity for low and moderate income families to go and file their taxes. And after Sandy, we know that tax returns became imminently more complex. So we launched our tax program, was actually a response that January as part of our Sandy response, just building infrastructure to a human service need that we knew weren't there. And so a lot of the things that, you don't normally associate as part of the recovery very much become a part of the recovery. Anything that helps families that never knew what need was, perhaps, now find themselves relying on a much broader network just to get the basics and just to get through whatever that recovery effort in front of them might be.
What is your greatest need and your organization's greatest need right now?
I think one of the most important things that we can do is create awareness. We think of the problem of hunger as something very distant from our community, when in fact it's something very close, something that can live right next door in our neighbor's home. And I think more importantly, we need to really understand who, especially in Monmouth and Ocean County, especially as we're remembering the effects of Sandy and telling the stories about so many that are still affected by Sandy, that these are our neighbors. These are our neighbors. These are, when we talk about assistance program and connecting with resources, these are folks that until, October 29th came along in many cases, they were doing and living life exactly the way you and I might have been living life. But unfortunately, they had a different set of circumstances. Sandy came along to really disruptive in a way that was unimaginable and unthinkable.
Carlos Rodriguez, the Executive Director of Fulfill, formerly the Food Bank of Monmouth and Ocean Counties. You're doing great work, and we really appreciate your participation tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, and have a good evening. We're going to take one more call. Okay, let's go straight to it, if you don't mind, Mr. Mark. Let's get to line 2 and welcome in. It's Townsqare Tonight. What's your first name and where are you from?
Deborah Vershak, Little Lake Harbor Township.
Miss Vershak, how are you tonight?
Oh, fine, thank you. And yourself, Tom?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And I know that you have come a long way back from the devastation of 5 years ago.
Yes, I did. I'm one of the lucky ones. I got back into my home the end of last summer. It was a very long, hard fight. I had to appeal my insurance companies 4 times, and I won the appeal all 4 times. FEMA didn't do much for me. I think they gave me $126, which wasn't even enough to buy a front door. I did have 4 feet of water in my house, so I lost everything in my house. And I had to raise naturally. We did get scammed, so it taught us a lesson, but fortunately it wasn't for much money. However, I was lucky, and I got in touch with the governor's helpline, and I spoke with one individual, asked for his name, and dealt with him due to the problems I was having with the REM program. And he helped me very much with the REM program.
There were points, Deborah, at which you really didn't know where your next dollar was going to come from. What was running through your head at that point?
I thought I was going to lose my house because at that time I became disabled, and I also got cancer during the same time as Sandy. And without my job, my husband's also disabled. It was scary, very scary. And I had to cash in my 401 naturally to help pay the mortgage. I tried reaching out to family for help, and I couldn't get it until his brother Bob gave us a loan. But nobody was really there to help.
Yeah, and I think that's a point that is often overlooked, because the first thing that you want to ask somebody is, well, then you go to your family. But a lot of times family either can't or won't.
In my case, it was the family I asked wouldn't, which is very sad because I was always there for them in the past.
Tragic, but not unusual. Absolutely not unusual.
This is true, but what I resented more than anything was how the township taxed everybody for their property while the houses were being built and they weren't even living in them.
There was no moratorium on that?
No, none at all. We just got back in the house and we got hit with all these taxes for living in the house, and they went by the amount of how much the house would have been worth once it was restored.
Was there any discussion about it, or was it simply a one-way conversation?
You could have tried to appeal it, but at that time I was not capable to appeal it because of the pain I was in. Mm-hmm. I just had surgery, neck surgery on my cervical. So, and you only had like a month's notice to do so, to get the paperwork together.
When you finally got back in the house, looking back on all of the obstacles, now that you've been able to absorb it, talk to people who are still not there, who haven't even gotten where you've gotten yet. What is the one piece of advice that you would give them?
The one piece of advice I would give, I know that the people from the REM program do not get back to you. I have to say, I did have a liaison speaking on my behalf with, oh my goshness, I can't even remember the name. That program, that organization that helps if you're not given enough money. They were on your show once.
Is it the long-term recovery group?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
They weren't able to help me financially, but I had a liaison. Her name was Ziva. So I would send her all copies of the paperwork, as well as the REM supervisor who was in charge of my case. And she, thank God for her, she pushed them, and that helped me a lot. And I would suggest anybody to get a liaison to speak to them, because otherwise you're not going to get answers. I know one person right around the corner from me where he hasn't gotten a penny yet from REM, and he had to spend money out of his pocket.
And one other question for you, and it's kind of, it's not about the mechanics of it, but it's about fraud. You mentioned that you had undergone a certain degree of it. You said it wasn't that bad, but you place your trust in somebody and they walk off with your money. Do you feel violated at the end of that?
Oh, yes, I did, but I was more disappointed with our system and the government for that. He was very smart. What he did was, when he went to meetings to get employed, rather than get employed, he robbed their paperwork, their headers, and he came with their headers, their business contract, and that's how he got us. And when I realized that we were getting fraud, I called the police. He took off, but the police caught up with him after I made the complaint. They arrested him, and then they let him go on his own reconnaissance, although he was wanted in 2 other states.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Vershik, you've been through a lot, and we appreciate you opening up a little bit about it for us.
Oh, I appreciate you letting me tell people, but I really suggest they get a liaison. A long-term recovery was great for that. And also look for any grant available. They have to keep looking, because you never know what might pop up.
All righty. I know you've been through a lot today alone. I hope the family's okay, and I hope everything's fine. She had a rough road, and her husband did too, and they've been in really constant touch over the time. This is typical of what you've seen?
There's nothing new going on, and you've heard just in these first 2 phone calls almost the full gamut of experiences. I mean, the gentleman from the food bank was talking about people having economic difficulties, and people that we're finding from Sandy victims, it gets worse and worse the longer you're out of your home, the longer you have to struggle. We're seeing people who are having mental health issues, addiction issues. This woman talked about personal health issues, physical health issues. We see that over and over, having to deal with the bureaucratic nightmare that is REM, getting let down by your own government, having to get scammed by contractors. I mean, this is just the first 2 phone calls, and you're hearing this, and we hear this over and over and over every day. This is what's going on, and you don't realize it because we talk to some people, and they're like, Sandy, that's still going on? What you don't realize is that people are living this nightmare quietly at home, letting the clock run out, and just feeling like they're absolutely hopeless. And
And
you'll
that's
see
a
it
key,
more and
you know,
more.
you brought up a key point. Sandy, that's still going on. We're 5 years down the road. It's the parallel to what we thought of Katrina 5 years after that. And this is, you know, now we've got Houston, we've got Florida, and we've got Puerto Rico, who are now at the front of that line.
One of the things we
Does it
saw,
become more
and
difficult?
I'm sure Joe will say the same thing because he was in Texas. When we saw people in Texas and in Florida pushing their belongings out onto the front porch to get picked up and thrown away and dealing with the beginning of this, you know, what we know that they don't know is, oh my God, you've got years ahead of you. It's not going to be days, it's not going to be weeks, it's not going to be months. Your life will be upside down for years, and you don't even know what lies ahead of you. And in some cases, maybe they shouldn't know because it's heartbreaking to look them in the eye and understand, because we've lived it, what's ahead of them, what they're going to have to go through.
Doug, did you tell people when you were down there helping that you still weren't home 5 years later?
I mentioned to a few people that we were not home. I did not go into it in detail. I just didn't have the heart.
Tried to keep it to a minimum.
Yeah.
You know, these people didn't want to rip up their floors, and there was mold, you know, and it was visible, and
There was just some denial going on. They didn't
Is
wanna
there,
grasp it.
from your standpoint, is there a possibility that all the cumulative knowledge that has accrued since, well, let's say since Katrina, when they learned how to deal with it differently after that, and then Sandy, can that all be applied and become more efficient for what's in front of us now?
It should be, but it's not being done. I mean, look at the lessons we learned from Katrina. They weren't really applied to Sandy. We actually paid a price because of Katrina. And the Sandy lessons we've learned are not being applied in Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico. We kind of know what needs to be done, but has anything been developed? Any programs that would stop the fraud that's been going on? 5 years. Nothing has been done.
yeah, these contractors don't even need a background check required.
Yeah, sure. Contractors that have been ripping off Sandy survivors here could pick up and move there if they hadn't, and just do it all over again. Because right now it's their business, it's the LLC that they are sort of registering. We don't track people with even criminal convictions. When we were at Jim's house in Port Monmouth yesterday, he was talking about one of the contractors who's been covered a lot in the media, Jamie Lawson, right? Is that who he's talking? Yeah. And he had done it in 2 other states. And then just kind of moved here to New Jersey, and he has taken over $1 million, or is allegedly taken over $1 million from Sandy families. So that just seems like it wouldn't be that hard to figure out a fix for. We just need the political will, and that's a national issue, right? Not a state issue.
So that places it in Congress's lap. Now, I know you have concerns about the pace at which things go on in Congress and all of the myriad different issues that land on the front burner that take this and move it off to the side. So, are you concerned that the political climate in Washington now is going to snag the works even more?
Well, here's where we have an opportunity to make change that we've been talking about. The National Flood Insurance Program is up for reauthorization. They have until December 8th to get a new program going. We can make changes to that program that will help the people get their money fairly. Provide mitigation prior to a disaster, just a whole bunch of other things that are actually going to work for the people and not for the insurance companies. Because after Sandy, the only one who made out were the insurance companies. We had to fight for years to get our fair share and the money that was owed to us. So the reauthorization is something that we can do right now and get that passed and really help families moving forward.
What does it take to get those ideas onto paper in Washington?
Well, Doug, you had a conversation with our chief of staff of our congressman here about those issues, right?
Yes.
Congressman MacArthur?
We met with Congressman MacArthur's chief of staff, and we spoke specifically about what has to happen to fix the National Flood Insurance Program. And we've met as NJOP with many of our political leaders. And one of the points that was raised at yesterday's meeting by one of our congressmen is the National Flood Insurance Program is not set up to benefit the people. The National Flood Insurance Program is set up to benefit banks, insurance companies, and politically connected contractors. We need to fix this situation specifically so that it is something to benefit the citizens and the consumers of the United States who pay these premiums and the average Americans who are out of their homes and their lives are ruined. We need things specifically to make sure that the insurance companies are paying people honest claims. We need to make sure that there is consequences for them cheating people, because there really is no consequences. There's literally a clause written into the National Flood Insurance Program that says that they have immunity for fraud prosecution. If they commit fraud against the American consumer, they're immune. There needs to be something where people are held accountable for their actions. There needs to be something where if I as a citizen need to sue for my a fair claim, which I had to do, it cost me $40,000 in legal fees. I did not get that reimbursed. That's money that's not going into rebuilding my house. What I did find out is that who did get reimbursed is Selective Insurance Company that cheated me. The federal government reimbursed them for their legal expenses out of our insurance premiums. The system is insane.
And would that $40,000 would probably make a difference in helping you get home faster,
huge
right?
Huge difference.
Yeah. So while policyholders are out when they have to fight the private insurance companies that run this national program, the private insurance companies are not. It's absurd. It's almost hard to believe. And there's legislation that's been introduced both in the House and the Senate that we really like. We think it takes the lessons that we've learned the hard way and applies them. It's called the SAFE NFIP Act, and that's where we would love to see things go. But the National Flood Insurance Program was up for reauthorization in the end of September, and they basically just reauthorized it as it was and kind of kicked the ball. I don't know. I'm not great with sports metaphors. Kick the ball down the court, something.
Kick the can down the road.
Kick the can down the road. There you go. And here we are doing it again in December. So the question is, right, do we want to see more suffering or not?
I hear lobbyists behind all this, and how do you contend with that? I mean, do you have to fight them fire with fire? And can you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's interesting the way some of the interests sort of align around flood insurance issues and some that don't. I mean, what we really need is the kind of, actually with the SAFE NFIP Act, it's got a pretty amazing collection of sponsors. It's got Marco Rubio from Florida and Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, who you would rarely, I know you just looked up startled. It has an amazing coalition of sponsors who you would not see on the same legislation, but they're all people that are from states that have experienced devastating storms and flooding, and they're putting party politics aside, putting, lobbyist interests aside, and trying to advocate for changes to these programs. And that's the kind of spirit that we need.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that came up, I read it recently. We talked a little bit about the dispersal of funds, and one writer suggested that maybe the answer is not directly to hand people money, but to have an intermediary, sort of like someone in the long-term recovery group, somebody on that level, to kind of oversee the expenditures, so that as kind of a gatekeeper, so that people are not conned and write out that check for somebody and never see that money again. Like, just as you were talking about contractor moving from state to state and leaving no footprint, someone to do the background check that someone in a panic is not going to do, who won't have the means to do, and kind of work on that level, so that the individual homeowner doesn't necessarily have to get involved in writing the checks, but has the work done and authorizes the checks based on someone else's recommendation. Does that sound like a plan? Does that sound like it's workable?
So they did that with the REM program, and that was Pathway C, which is the program I was in. And that makes a lot of sense. I didn't have money to put out at the time, so Pathway C gave me all the contractors approved by the state. No money came out of my pocket. I didn't exchange any money with them. My 90-day project took 3 years. So they actually did away with Pathway C because it was such a miserable failure.
If you want to take a really good idea and ruin it in the execution, put the government in charge. I mean, the thought is that, we're going to have a government official who's going to handle all the money and make sure that everyone's honest. Bear in mind what's going on in the defense industry.
What
with
if it
the
isn't a
military
government-
buying $600 hammers and all the crazy things that have gone on? It's really a model for inefficiency. How about if they're going to do something that you actually put something in place where these bad actors don't get to travel from state to state and con people after people after people from each disaster, where there's a tracking system, where there needs to be background checks? That would be government's role in this. So at least that the field is a level playing field of honest characters that we can go to and we can trust to do the work for us.
In some cases, like REM-approved contractors and REM contractors that were picked by the state in Pathway C ended up being fraudulent contractors. I'm thinking of something that Deborah said that I wanted to mention when she was talking about how much it helped her to have a disaster case manager. And in her case, she talked about the Ocean County Long-Term Recovery. We are so glad to be here on your show. I get to see you every Sandy anniversary, but you could have chosen not to do a story because it's been 5 years. What's happening is, because it's been 5 years, all the philanthropic money, all the donations are drying up for the kinds of groups that do that, and those services are not out there anymore. The free lawyers that used to help that I could send people to, that they're not doing it anymore. The nonprofit builders that can pick up cases where there's been serious fraud and really help people out, they're not doing it anymore. I'm not sure how much longer. I mean, we should find out from the Ocean County Long-Term Recovery Group what kind of capacity they have now. So actually, 5 years later, when you've got that 1 in 5 families that really needs a hand getting across the finish line, you got nothing anymore to help with that, which is actually very serious in terms of the way we plan after a disaster.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking briefly before we'll step out for a second, let's look at something that actually worked. And let's go to the governor and let's go to everything that he bragged about for a week. In many respects, they went to work overtime to repair the infrastructure, the roads. The Northern Barrier Island was a mess. The utilities were down. The phone lines were down. The gas lines were down. Everything was down. And I remember taking calls that night, and people said the Barrier Island's on fire. And those were flames shooting up from where the gas lines were. And it was, I think, about 48 hours before NJNG decided, okay, we're going to have to shut the lines down, period, so we can do this. Because they were trying to do it case by case, and it would take them forever. They'd still be out there. But Jeff Tittle from the Sierra Club, I talked to him the other day, and he said, all good, but in the rush to restore everything to what normal was, they basically placed everything back in harm's way. And he said, but is that hindsight? Is that just 2020 hindsight? Oh, we should take a step back and rethink everything and do it a different way. We didn't have time for that back then. So on balance, do you think that we can manage with what we've got now that it's back in place?
So our immediate response to Sandy, I thought, was well done. Especially, I'm from Stafford Township. I think my town responded remarkably to get services up and running. But this is where we have the problem. We should have had a plan in place prior to this disaster that says, okay, when this road gets wiped out, how are we going to rebuild it? Are we going to mitigate for future disasters? Are we going to elevate it? What are we going to do with the gas lines? Because this is going to continue to happen. And here we are, 5 years later, we still don't have a comprehensive management plan to deal with the next storm, to deal with sea level rise, to deal with climate change. And that's been a big failure of this administration. So that is something that we need to address because, as we can see, storms are more frequent. They're more powerful. Next time it comes, are we going to rebuild the boardwalk at the same height that it was in the last storm? Are we going to begin to buy up some of these properties that are constantly flooding over and over again? That's where our Blue Acres program comes into the discussion.
We are at Sandy Plus 5, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank you for joining us tonight. We have a few minutes to go. We're speaking with Amanda DeVecca-Rainier of the New Jersey Resource Project, and with Joe Mangino and Doug and Heather Quinn from the New Jersey Organizing Project. They have an extensive report out called The Long Road Home, and I strongly suggest you read it if you have an interest in what has transpired over the last 5 years and what we can expect in the next 5. We're going to step out for just a second, and we appreciate you hanging around because we'll be back right after this.
Tune into.
You cried on her first day of kindergarten. You spent all your vacation time looking for the best colleges. You may think that telling your child in college that binge drinking is dangerous is a waste of your time. You may even think that checking in with her every day is a waste of energy. Well, it's not. College students who believe their parents' opinions are important are less likely to binge drink. Keep your child in check. Visit parentchecknj.com. This message sponsored by the Impact New Jersey Coalition, a program of the New Jersey Prevention Network, Partnership for a Drug-Free New Jersey, the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, the New Jersey Broadcasters Association, and this station.
Tune in to Luz Kategna, certified financial planner and host of The Financial Physician, every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Beach Radio 1160 and 1310. It's more important than ever to keep informed about the economy, financial markets, investments, and income taxes. He'll take your phone calls and answer questions on any money matter. You'll hear no-nonsense, straightforward financial advice and commentary. So make an appointment with your financial physician every Sunday at 11 a.m. right here on Beach Radio 1160 and 1310. Registered investment advisory services through Argentis Advisors.
When it comes to Halloween, there's no trick to making a special day a real treat for the entire family. Hi, I'm Ocean County Freeholder Jack Kelly. It's important that motorists, parents, and trick-or-treaters alike think about safety on this annual day of make-believe. Motorists, children, and parents all need to take precautions. Be alert for children who may be walking on roadways, medians, and curbs. Take care when entering and exiting driveways, and especially during twilight and later in the evening, keep an eye out for children in dark costumes. Parents can help make Halloween a pleasant and safe event by making sure someone responsible is supervising younger children. Trick-or-treaters need to stay to a planned route. Children should travel in familiar areas. And that all trick-or-treat safety precautions, including pedestrian and traffic safety rules, are reviewed and followed. If we work together, we can keep our children safe and leave the scary part of Halloween to the ghosts and goblins. Thank you, and enjoy Halloween safely.
Running low on the stuff you need? Time for a Target run. We're here for all the big moments and the little ones too, like scoring a honeysuckle turkey with plenty of time to thaw this week for 69 cents a pound, or making grandma's casserole recipe. Get cream of mushroom with Progresso soup on sale for $1.25. Then, for easy cleanup, stock up on Dawn dish soap and Scotch-Brite sponges for just $3.99 each. Get in, out, and on your way. Target run and done. Pricing may vary, restrictions may apply.
When you have sleep apnea, traveling can be a real drag because you have to drag your big, bulky home CPAP device with you everywhere you go. But not anymore. Now you can travel easily and sleep comfortably anywhere thanks to Transcend, the world's very first mini CPAP. And right now, you can try Transcend absolutely risk-free for 10 restful nights. So call now, 1-800-900-0259. Our smallest and most advanced portable design ever, Transcend is as small as a soda can and weighs less than a pound. You can even add a battery that's as tiny as a deck of cards. Transcend is so incredibly small and light, you can easily fit it in your briefcase or purse to use anywhere you go. It's FAA compliant too, so you can even sleep comfortably while flying. Now you can enjoy the freedom to sleep comfortably anywhere. But don't delay. To receive your 10-night in-home trial, call minicpap.com now. 1-800-900-0259. Again, that's 1-800-900-0259.
Be a part of the conversation. Call now, 732-505-1160. Townsquare tonight on Beach Radio 1160, 1310 and mybeachradio.com.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Tom Angeli with you. And with us in the studio tonight as we mark Sandy plus 5. Our Amanda DeBecca Rainier from the New Jersey Organizing Project, and Doug and Heather Quinn and Joe Mangino. Well, you're from the New Jersey Organizing Project, and Amanda's New Jersey Resource Project. They have monitored everything that's been going on since the storm and continue to do so. And for those of you who are not following the stream tonight on mybeachradio.com, I really have to point out that Doug and Heather are resplendent. Doug they're giving us a little advance notice of tomorrow night's Halloween parade here in Townsqare. Doug is in his Batman costume, and Heather is dressed as a harlequin. Harlequin.
Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn. So the pun is not lost on us. And I thought it was mighty brave of you to keep the costumes on.
We dress like this every day, actually.
Oh, okay.
It just happens to be Halloween.
It just happens to be Halloween. You mentioned in one of the discussions we had that a lot depends on the next governor. I have been loosely following the dialogue that they've both been carrying on. Haven't heard a whole lot about this. How do you connect with them? Once January rolls around, how do you drill this into the front seat?
So we've already begun drilling. We've met with Mr. Murphy, and we shared what we thought was a good Sandy plan moving forward, and he developed an 8-point plan based on some of our recommendations. We also tried to reach out to the Guadano camp, but we never heard back. So at least one side listened, and whoever wins, they're still going to hear from us because we have a lot of ideas, and we need to make sure that people in the community, their ideas and suggestions get taken very seriously.
Let's get to that call. We've got one coming in on line 1, and let's see who's there. Gone again. Okay, fine. We have more time to talk. We have. So tell us more about the report. There's a lot in there, and it's kind of like describing the Grand Canyon. So, from your perspective, what should we be looking for in there? What is the thing that? What's the big talking point for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you some of the things that maybe aren't a surprise, and then some of the things that were a surprise. And the only reason we were able to get this report done is because of the hours and hours Sandy survivors spent answering a survey, and also volunteers knocking on doors. Joe, Doug, Heather. We went out into communities. We surveyed people, and that's how we got this information. So Deborah's story really taught us a lot. Really demonstrated a lot of what we found in the report. But I have some specific numbers. So 77% of the survey respondents didn't have enough money to finish rebuilding their homes, or they had to rely on or borrow money from other funding sources. And we got a look for the first time at those other funding sources. So 26% of the people had to cash in their retirement investments. That has long-term implications for the stability of our community, especially for older folks that now don't have that to draw on when the taxes are going up on their homes. 46% of them had savings to pull out of, and that's a blessing. 23% had credit card debt. That's how they're financing rebuilding after a disaster. And then 30% of them said they needed additional funding, but they didn't know where to get it.
All of that money, it basically rips apart at the fabric of the community, because then you don't have a community.
Mm-hmm. And people are missing. And then I think another thing
you also run into the situation of having to give up the property, and then dealing with speculators who come in, are basically there to flip the property, not to really develop it. And then that creates a whole nother cycle of finances and economic structure that kind of gallops out of control.
And then you lose the fabric of your community, what it was before, because you'll never get that back. Now you have other people coming in that aren't familiar with living in a frontline coastal area. So they're building these houses with a lot of impervious surface, which is going to contribute to flooding, things like that. And then where did those people go? The people that left. Mm-hmm. We can't do enough surveying to figure out where they disappeared to, what happened to them. So many, we've touched on the mental health aspect of this. These people, poor people, are suffering. I know so many that just walked away, and they're not even in New Jersey anymore. They gave up and filed bankruptcy and walked away.
Few of them stuck around. Let's get to this call and see who's on the line. Welcome into Townsqare tonight. What's your name and first name, and where are you from?
It's Tom Kelleher, Mayor of Toms River.
Mayor Kelleher, thank you for calling, and thank you for taking part in this discussion. I know you didn't expect to be in the middle of all this.
In the middle of all what? I just got on. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
We're talking about 5 years after the Superstorm. I know
okay.
it took you as it hit you as much as it hit everybody else, and everybody. Silverton, where a couple of our guests tonight are from, everybody in Ortley,
Yep.
all along the bay. And so just tell us, basically give us a visual, if you can, of what improvements you've seen, where things still need to happen.
Well, very briefly, the first thing I got to say is it's hard to believe it's 5 years because all of those visions are just vivid in my mind. From the very first morning I got over there to see the total devastation. I stood in the middle of Route 35 South with a couple of our police officers looking north, and I said, you couldn't go up there. The houses were floated down from the oceanfront poles. Utility poles are all across. And I can remember saying to the officer, where do you even begin to start to clean this up? Now, having said that, the transition to the present time is absolutely remarkable. Houses are built where they were washed away. Ortley, pretty much before the storm, was mostly bungalows on concrete, one-story bungalows on concrete slabs. After Sandy, based on the FEMA floodplain elevation maps, you couldn't build those kind of houses. So people have built higher and bigger houses. And we even waived the height requirement for people building houses that they could raise beyond the 35-foot limit from the zoning ordinance to go as many feet higher than they had to over that limit to comply with the FEMA maps, because otherwise everybody would have had to go to the Board of Adjustment. But as far as what's going on over there, Tom, I can't tell you exactly what still has to be done. That's kind of tough to keep track of. And on any one street, you could have a number of problems, which we found from day one. Some people are waiting for an insurance company. Some people don't have the money to do it. Some people are waiting for the contractor to elevate their homes because they were burned in the past by incompetent people. So there are a whole bunch of reasons why they're not back. But I think the best gauge we have is that as a result of the storm along the coast, the coastal towns lost $4 billion in ratables, and $2 billion of them were right here in Toms River, and that translated to about an $18 million loss in revenue. Thank goodness, between Governor Christie and the federal government, over a 3-year period, we got these CBG grants in diminishing terms each year based on what had gone back on the payroll. So of the billions of dollars, the $2 billion that we lost, we figure we're still about $400 million to go yet.
Mayor, you mentioned the tremendous impact on the ratables, and the township had its own financial difficulties to deal with without it. So was there any, I don't know how this worked out for you, but was the town able to work with people in terms of their property tax payments, maybe offer a moratorium?
No, you know what? I thought that was going to be a problem, and it wasn't. There was no need to do that. And I'll tell you, we run a pretty tight ship, but everybody has to realize is that, we lost those radios, but we still had to run the town. We still had 18 schools in the Toms River system. We have police officers working in 2 shifts around the clock. Public works guys are working, but we were able to do all of that and not have to raise the taxes. If we hadn't gotten that money from the federal government and the state, we would have had to make up that $18 million by raising the taxes for everybody else in town, and that would have absolutely been a devastating thing. We couldn't afford to lay people off because everybody was working, on the storm damage. So, as a matter of fact, we facetiously had said that I had to people said, what would you have done if you didn't get that money? And my plan was that I was going to grow a white beard, buy a surfboard, move to the island of Maui, never to be seen or heard from again. But because that would have been devastating.
Now that we're 5 years away, and now that you've had a chance, you've seen some rebuilding, you've seen the infrastructure come back. Are we ready in Toms River for the next storm?
Well, let me say this: with the compliance with the floodplain elevation maps, the houses are up above what the FEMA says will be safe, and the water will go under them and not push them off their foundations. In the meantime, the other thing's going to make it much safer is that finally, after we got all the easements signed, the Army Corps of Engineers is doing the beach replenishment. Tom, they gave us about 2 weeks of work back in July to help expand our beach for the summer, and what a difference that made. And they worked for 2 weeks, 24 hours a day, and really expanded the beach. When those last two hurricanes went north, even way offshore, they generated a lot of waves, and the work that the Army Corps did really acted as a buffer, and that's only a token amount of what they're going to do when they get here later in the year.
Have they given you a start date?
Well, they have, and they haven't. They said, look, this is what our plan is, but it's contingent upon the weather and other problems. They just were working up in Manalope, and they had to stop and take the boats back around Sandy Hook to get out of the seas, because if the seas are over 3 feet, they can't stay connected to the pipe that runs up onto the beach.
Okay.
So,
One more question.
Yes.
I'll let you go.
Sure. No, that's all right. Go ahead.
You meet someone from the township, and they say, Mayor, I've gone through everything I've got in the bank. I owe everybody. I've had to move things. I'm paying the mortgage. I'm paying your taxes. I'm paying to get this house done. I've gotten pennies on the dollar from the REM program, from FEMA, and I'm at my wit's end. What do you tell them?
Well, there are a couple of programs that we can help people. I mean, let me just tell you this: we're very sympathetic to that situation, and we're not unfamiliar with it. You know, people who had to be displaced still had to keep paying the mortgage on the house that was tipped over, and then pay rent wherever they were living. So that in and of itself created a hardship. People lost their jobs because of the damage to businesses. There is some help. Bon Jovi set up the Soul Kitchen up here in Silverton, and the folks that started the People's Pantry are still there in business adjacent to the Soul Kitchen. We have a relationship with the county and their social services. So, everybody in a problem might have a different problem, but we certainly go out of our way to help those people because we're very sympathetic to the problem.
Okay, Mayor, one quick question from Doug Quinn of the New Jersey Resource Project.
Colonel Kelleher, how are you, sir?
Okay, good, Doug.
Always good to talk to another Marine.
Semper Fi.
Well, Semper Fi, my friend. But I will say this to you. The person that John just described is pretty much me. And I know there are many of us here in Toms River who are not home yet. Do you, by chance, have an idea, sir, how many Toms River residents are not back in their homes yet?
No, I can't tell you that because it was a very difficult number to track. Because one of the things is, too, some people just left and they're not coming back. They were second homes, vacation homes. They weren't going to get any FEMA money. Maybe they couldn't afford to fix them or elevate them or whatever, and just abandoned homes. So we have quite a number of abandoned homes. I can't give you a number right now.
Okay. But I understand it's difficult, sir. I will make the point that there is nothing about Sandy that is not difficult. If I can make a suggestion as a Toms River resident who is still struggling to get back home 5 years later, there are certain things that the township really needs to address. Some of them are culturally in terms of the way that we are approached by people who work for the town. Some of them are systematic, like it is ridiculous to wait 2 months to get a building permit. Every builder I talk to rolls their eyes when they talk about getting a permit in Toms River. And I don't want to knock the town, sir. I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of great friends, and I know there's a lot of really good people that work for the town of Toms River. But there are some issues, and all of the people who are the easy cases are home now, sir. The only people that are left are the cases that are complex and difficult, such as myself. And perhaps what I could suggest to you, sir, if you just allow me to finish, sir, if I could suggest to you that we get a handle on who is not home in Toms River yet, and we get all of those people together in a room with some representatives from the township, and we start case by case saying, okay, what do you need to get back home? And we start having somebody doing some of the blocking and tackling down at Town Hall and the building department to get some of these cases resolved.
Let him.
All right, let me just tell you this. We have had a couple of those sessions. We've had the DCA come down. We've had meetings like that in the auditorium. They had representatives. We went around the room and did exactly what you're saying. Now, could we do that again? If there's that much of a need, I'd be happy to set that up. But
I would like to get with you at some point this week if we can, sir, and make that arrangement, because it's not necessarily the DCA that we need to talk to. We need to, do this as a family here in Toms River and meet with our township officials and really get together
but
the
if
people.
you want to solve the problem, we'd like to go to the people who have more authority than me. And I would just want to say one other thing about the building department. We get complaints from residents saying, God, my bill is still waiting, he didn't get some. I want to tell you something. We checked every one of those things out, and can I tell you that about 90% of these delays or complaints that we get from homeowners are a result of the builders not telling the people the truth. They're going from job to job, and it's easy to blame the town. And when we go and dig up one, and we do it every time because we want our inspectors in our building department to do what's right for our people. And it's amazing that about 90% of the complaints we get have to do with the builder and not our department. So give me a call. I'm always around. I have an open door policy. I'd be happy to talk to you.
You'll be hearing from me, Colonel. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care now.
Thank you, Mayor Kelleher, and have a good evening.
Tom, I'll see you. Thank you.
Take care. Okay, I'm going to call a play from scrimmage here. I know we have a break about 6 minutes ago, and we're just going to go to it and wrap, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen in the room, any last comments before we go?
Thank you, and to everyone out there who's listening, who still isn't home, keep fighting. You can do it, and you're not alone. Reach out to an organization, friend, family, faith-based group that you might be part of, and you can get there. Amanda DeBecca-Renier, Joe Mangino, and Doug and Heather Quinn, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Townsqare Tonight. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. My name is Tom Angeli. Have yourself a good evening. We'll see you next time.
This has been Townsqare Tonight, a presentation of Beach Radio News. To find out more about tonight's show and stay up to date on everything happening in your hometown, log on to mybeachradio.com. The Jersey Shore's best oldies, Beach Radio 1160, 1310.